Hello, my name is Colin Goldberg, and welcome to the Techspressionist Salon number 56. Today is Wednesday, November 9th, and the theme of tonight's salon is cultural influences. And that was suggested by Giovanna, who's here with us tonight. And the way it's going to work is, if you're interested in presenting your work, please use the reactions button at the bottom of the Zoom grid window to raise your hand, and I will call on artists in the order that I see them in the queue there. So and again, it does not need to be any kind of real formal presentation, although if you did create a formal presentation, that's great too. You're more than welcome to share your screen and pull work up either off your desktop or off the web or whatever you so choose, and the topic of cultural influences is also, quite widely open to interpretation. So without further ado, I see on the top of my list is Verneda. So Verneda, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, we can do that. Well, since I had my NFT presentation today, and it's all about cultural influences, I figured I would do a repeat. It lasts about 5 minutes. So
Great.
let's get started.
Oh, and if you're not presenting, if you could mute yourself, that would be appreciated.
Let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Let me pull up get my screen queued up here. Okay. Okay. Well, good evening. My name is Verneda Lights, and I'm a visual artist who uses both Techspressionist and traditional approaches to create fine art. My artistic practice is richly informed by my background as a graphic and web designer, author, performance poet, historian, retired physician, and griot of the Gullah Geechee Nation of the South Carolina Lowcountry. The title of my NFT project is Gullah Me 2.0. Let me share my screen, get that started. Okay. Gullah Me 2.0 is the backstory to my original Gullah Me collection, which is a series of digitally rendered multi-dimensional portraits of myself and family members that were made during and in the aftermath of my stint as a family caregiver. This second phase in the Gullah Me story records my family's oral history as told by my father, Verneda Lights Sr. Soon, Gullah Me 2.0 will debut and be available on the blockchain as NFTs. I'm presenting before you today because I am basically on a vision quest, and I'm looking for 12 good, fearless people to walk with me on my NFT oral history to blockchain journey. I call them my Undaunted Dozen. The Undaunted Dozen are good, brave souls who care about Black culture and Black art, social justice, and preservation of the cultures of Black and Indigenous peoples of color here in the United States and abroad. But just in case you think the Undaunted Dozen are not enough, their group is too small, remember that 12 unlearned people changed the world 2,000 years ago, and we witness how their lives changed our world every time we see a church. So in order to find my Undaunted Dozen, I will tell you a story. The name of the story is, well, you guessed it, Gullah Me 2.0. Visually, Gullah Me 2.0 is a human-machine hybrid art product and prose narrative. The illustrations are the results of a collaboration between myself as a visual artist and the artificial intelligence software platform DALL-E. So follow my story examine the illustrations, then meet with me later on to tell me what you think. Let's go. I am Gullah. My ethnic group within the African diaspora is the Gullah Geechee Nation of the South Carolina Lowcountry. We are the descendants of enslaved Africans who were the cruelly unpaid laborers of early American history. The story you will hear today focuses on my father, Verneda Lights Sr., a national and internationally known Gullah chef and World War II veteran with the gift of gab, who became one of the first Black master sergeants in the United States Marine Corps. But today, you will meet him as a child. My father, Verneda Lights Sr., was a child laborer who picked cotton at the age of 3. He was often hungry, and when the soles of his shoes wore out, he replaced them with cardboard and newspaper. Young Verneda slept on a straw mattress. The roof leaked when it rained. And of course, he got wet. Embarrassed by his poverty and discouraged by hunger, he dropped out of school in the 3rd grade. I chose to launch GullahMe 2.0 within the NFT space because my people are in danger of cultural extinction, and the blockchain is the closest thing we have to a Rosetta Stone. Books can be banned, but the blockchain, despite its limitations, is the closest thing we have to being written in stone. Oral histories are important because they share collective wisdom and insights that strengthen our communities and our nations. So if you believe that it is important to preserve the oral histories of those whose cultures are endangered, meet with me later on in the board session after the Salon meeting and let me know what your thoughts are. If you want to learn more, you can go to my website, gullahme.com, gullahme.com, and click on the tab that says GullahMe 2.0 NFT project and sign up for future email notices. Thanks, and I can entertain any questions you may have.
Thanks, Verneda. Yeah, I guess maybe we could. I think maybe what we've been doing is sort of holding all the questions until the end, and then we kind of can open it up into an open discussion. That way, we'll make sure that everyone gets a chance to present first. So, so yeah, thank you for sharing your presentation. And if anyone has some questions for Verneda or any of the other presenters, we will open it up when everyone's done. And we also have David Bloom has an announcement to make about a potential artist opportunity and a new project that he's going to be sharing also after the artist presentations. So the next artist up in the lineup is Giovanna. And when you come on, if you would like to share, where you're located as well, that would be great, just so people have an idea of where everyone's zooming in from.
I think I just played the videos. I already I added. It's actually just this afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm not that good if I want to say something live, so I just made it video. People often ask me, how did I get Italian name? Like Giovanna, I have an Italian name. Well, when I changed to U.S. passport, I feel like, okay, let's change something different. So I didn't have a English name. Instead, I have an Italian name. I really like Italian culture, the food, the music, the history, the art, architecture, everything. When I graduated from college, I even I was a backpacker traveler, and I went to Italy, and I just love all this architecture and art. And it's also very funny because there's old saying that when Marco Polo traveled to China, and he learns how Chinese make those pancake, like with the scanned onion, green onions. So when he back to Italy, he start to teach people how to make pizza. Okay, I don't want to offend Italian, but that's something I heard when I studied in Taiwan. So that was I'll say this a cultural influence, but some people like these days the people they feel very angry. They'll say, "Oh, this is a cultural appropriation," which means something really bad. They think you shouldn't use other culture as represent your culture. I'm a big fan of Japanese culture and Italian culture. Actually, for some reason that I couldn't present the whole video, so I have to stop sharing right now. Maybe use YouTube if you don't mind, or if I can have a little time. Yeah.
Sure. Did you want to pull something else up now, or did you want to?
I have a lot of videos and the image. For some reason that let me find my YouTube channel. Maybe it's more easy to share. I can just it's always happened to me with the Zoom. For some reason, yeah, I just upload these videos. Okay. Oh, okay. Let me reshare, see if I can do that. Sorry about that. Okay. I get Italian name, like Giovanna. I have an Italian name. When I change U.S. passport, I feel like, okay, let's change something different. So I didn't have a English name. Instead, I have an Italian name. I really like Italian culture, the food, the music, the history, the art, architecture, everything. When I
think this is
graduated
the
from
same one
college,
that you're playing,
I need to make those. Yeah, for some reason I couldn't share the other slide. It is a cultural artist. We also have a scientist. We have Copernicus, and we have Christopher Columbus, because he built a place that we haven't discovered. So this is why that the Renaissance kind of is a biggest era in the human history that changed everything. And it's not only because they have these such a movement, but they influence a lot of things such as do we exist, and why do we have art? So we create, and why do we want to create art? In the age of a Renaissance, with traditional pen, and now we can use a computer to we can create art everywhere with the mobile phone and iPad, any device. And we also have a very similar situation that Black Death was a pandemic. When I want to find a new idea to create art, I find a lot of Renaissance public domain images from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I reinvent these old images. I create a digital video that's also come from Renaissance. When people think about trans-utopia, they may have different definitions, and they can mean so many things. But trans actually is one of my favorite music genre, EDM. And Utopia, it was coined by Sir Thomas More. That was come from the Northern Renaissance. Even though I create a lot of series and NFT and a lot of physical pen as well, I use Transutopia. I just decided to use it as a Creative Commons. It means you can free to use the term Transutopia. You also can, you still can collect a Renaissance style of architecture and designs. Also have a great influence. I use a lot of vintage, so I created the videos. You can use like for the desktop, like a wallpaper, or just like a video loop. The idea is that you can actually think about that, how you can utilize these reusers. So I so-called these as like a remix. And you can see that the ancient Rome, they use this dome. So I create these, I call these a mirage. So I reinvent. So we're in the new age of a Renaissance, industrialized blockchain, finance, art, science, architecture, even humanity.
Okay. I wish you all see the video. I don't know why. This somehow is always happen when I want to use a Zoom to share video. Anyway, so the whole idea is that Transutopia that actually come from Renaissance, and which I think now we're like a Renaissance. We have a pandemic. And when we have a pandemic, we think about why don't we live in the present? Like, you know, when I create art, I can just focus, so I can have less anxiety. And also, we all like we may become legacy. Who knows? Like this is like the next Renaissance. We have a blockchain, like we have art, we have all these movements. That's something like a Renaissance, because it's hard to believe that before the Renaissance, that people, they don't believe that we have the other side of the world. Like people don't not even believe with our Earth is like a globe. So I mean, this is a big movement, right? So so if we can use art, and also I do like to have the idea of Creative Commons as also like a social sculpture. You can release several rights that we can do a lot of collabs, like Remax and Remax. If we don't want to pay a lot of money for trademark, so why not? It's just more people get involved. So that's my sharing. Thank you, and I'm so glad I can share my idea.
Thank you, Giovanna. Thanks for sharing. And if you'd like to put your link to the video in the chat, definitely do that. And that way people could sort of watch it on their own. All right, so next up is Tommy.
Hi, so boy, I really enjoyed both Verneda and Giovanna's presentations. I'm thinking about this in kind of a different way. I'm gonna just do my little slideshow and get on with it. But I had a sort of more of a, I guess, direct response of what are the things that I think about when I'm making work as a visual influence. Maybe, and I took the question the wrong way, instead of the cultural, but maybe visual is cultural is the way I'm thinking about it. So let me see if I can just share this. Yes, good. So I just really feel lucky that I was raised around museums as a cultural influence. I grew up in the 1980s in Manhattan, and not everywhere was comfortable and safe. The subway was feeling like this, and Red Grooms really gave a sense of like what it felt like to be in a place visually. And that was my first aha moment, that sort of experience of like, wow, here's something that expresses like a feeling and the culture of a place. Red Grooms. So in the same museum, so this is the Whitney, right? In the old Whitney Museum on the Upper East Side, I visited. I was brought there when I was young to see a show, and Red Grooms was there. Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg were there too. And it's one of these things, right? I wonder if this one visit to a museum sort of changed the direction that I thought about, sort of what to do, what to think about, what to, pursue. And then I also, growing up in New York, you sort of are in tight quarters with all sorts of people. And this painter, Joan Schneider, lived across the street for a couple of years. And I got to see her work in process in her studio. And that was a huge cultural influence on me. And I think her work is something that we should all look at if you haven't seen it before. It's extraordinarily, strong in its voice of paint and painterly quality that I kind of love. And her partner at a certain point in her life was Larry Fink, this photographer whose work I also thought, when I saw it for the first time, just like mind explosion. So if you haven't seen his work, he works with flash photography and sort of most well known for documenting nightlife of the 80s in Manhattan. So I grew up in not in museums, but I would go to museums, fairly often. I went to public school, kind of far from where I lived, and there's a variety of ways to get home, including going through Central Park, which had the Museum of, the Metropolitan Museum, and then the Museum of Modern Art was just south of that. So as a kid, you could get in for like a quarter. You show them your, high school ID. And I discovered a lot of photography that I loved in the museum. Helen Levitt, Margaret Burke-White, and Andre Cortez were three of the ones who just still, every time I see their work, I think of, have the magic of the potential of the medium. And that's kind of maybe one of the threads that I think about in great work is the magic of the potential of the medium. Painting, photography has certain aspects to it, certain visual qualities that are magical, if you will. Muybridge and Mare were two photographers in the late 1800s that were sort of doing the same thing, taking multiple pictures very quickly. Muybridge on separate pieces of film. Mare, who you might not have heard of before, on one piece of film with like a rotating disc with a hole in it for a shutter. So Muybridge, Mare, we're at the Museum of the Moving Image, which is a place that I snuck off to. And I snuck off to the Guggenheim Museum, which is that 5 minutes? Oh no, somebody's calling me on FaceTime here. I'm sorry, I have to decline that. Spurned my real interest in architecture. It's sort of magical if you've never been to the Guggenheim Museum in anywhere actually, but the Guggenheim Museum in New York is this spiral, this sort of magical space that Frank Lloyd Wright created. And working around the same time with this idea of like organic architecture, which I think is the magic of it, is Antoni Gaudi in Barcelona. And I think he only built there. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong, but like there's a bunch of his buildings there. And one of the great things I did was save up to go to Barcelona and visit his architecture. And that was fantastic. And then libraries. I spend a lot of time in libraries. I love libraries, and books of photographs are magical, which encompasses a lot of the historic pictures that I get exposed to. Actually, Riegelander and Jerry Alsman are these collage artists who I think are also very influential on me. All right, I'm gonna stop. That's 9 slides in 10 minutes, but I appreciate your attention and I enjoy sharing work I like, so thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Tommy. Really interesting variety of work there that you shared. And let's see, Marlow is up next.
Hi, everyone. I have a very short keynote I'm going to share. And I was thinking about cultural influences. I actually thought of cultural influences in the sense of fear and faith. I grew up in a household that had a lot of discomfort going on in it. Here's one of the first digital pieces when I went from analog to digital photography. It's called The Girl's Best Friend. And that's little me in the corner, taken from a slide my father took of me. I would go out into the woods often to celebrate, to console, to have witness. That was my museum. I was fortunate in the suburbs of New York City to have the woods to go to. And yeah, there was violence. My father, unfortunately, he had a tragic beginning, but he became a successful anesthesiologist. He was the first to leave his village in Israel. But he grew up when that land was called Palestine, and his people came from the Caucasus. There were 12 tribes of Circassian, and his tribe was called the Adiga. So his father, my grandfather, migrated down to Palestine during the time there was a horrible Russo-Circassian war that lasted 100 years between mid-1800s, early 1900s, and there was tremendous genocide, and so many people around the world, their people have experienced this. So a big piece of my artwork source material is emotional in the sense of epigenics. I believe we all have imprints, generational imprints, and I have stories I can't share here, but things I did as a child that I had no idea. They were just rituals I did because I love the trees, so I do certain things with the trees, etc. I found out 40 years later after analyzing a dream that I was doing things my ancestors did in the Caucasus for certain reasons, protection, etc. So this piece that I have up now is called Homeland. That's my father down in the right-hand corner. That's me at age 16 when I visited Israel. They were horse people. But Dad had to sleep with a gun under his pillow and go to work with a gun in a holster. He was a beloved doctor. So too was my mother. She was a pediatrician. He was an anesthesiologist. And I think that provided the fear and also the faith in the work I do as a visual artist. You know, initially when I made that transition in the mid 2000s to digital photography, I thought, I'm going to show early work because it really exemplifies two very important threads of my work, the fear and the faith. I pulled my old black and white photos. I did a lot of negative burning, ripping photos, all sorts of crazy stuff as a ritual to honor those dark early days of my life and also to perform some sort of exorcism. So this piece is called Heavenly Void, based on a Chinese astrologer's question to me, what was going on in 1972? And I shared with him that, and this piece is named after that period of time in my life. Skip ahead. I spent 8 years on a couple of bodies of work, and what I've done here is I've knitted together some of a series I did called Restoration, in which I really spent a lot of time out in the natural world collecting files and weaving them together. All of these pieces are anywhere between 15 by 15 to 20 by 20. I just thought it would be fun to put this together for tonight. The work I'm doing now is very different. I'm not going to go into it. What I would like to do, though, is end with a short animation. The last year and a half, I've been working to develop my skill as an animator. And this piece called Making Light is about my journey, but I think everybody's journey as far as finding a place that we can call home. And I'll end with that. Thanks for your attention. And let me see if I can get that going. It does have sound. I'll stop my share. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your shares. I'm really enjoying learning about everyone's source material, so to speak.
Thank you, Marlow. That was really great. Thanks for sharing your work with us.
You bet.
Okay, so next up, we have Lee Musgrave.
Hello, everybody. I've had several cultural influences in my life, but I'd like to start way back at the beginning. I was born in Australia. My biological father was Bulgarian. And my real name is Leonard Petkov. My mother decided not to marry that man. She married an American Marine instead. His name was Musgrave. So I became from Leonard Petkov to Lee Musgrave. And believe me, when you go through that kind of change, it has an effect on you. And then we moved from Australia, which was one culture, to Los Angeles, which was an entirely different culture. But there I met an individual named Fritz Weiss from Germany. Fritz studied at the Bauhaus with Kandinsky and Klee. Fritz was the professor that I latched onto. Brilliant man, wonderful person. Really had a major impact on my approach to art and life in a general sense. Then, at the same time all of that is going on, I've always been a person who likes to read books. As you can see here, this is just a small sampling. I've got hundreds of books all over the house. But these are all murder mysteries. Most of them were written in Los Angeles, about Los Angeles culture. I especially like Raymond Chandler, for example, was one of my favorites. I grew up, and he didn't live too far from where I grew up. He was still alive when I grew up. So in the back of my mind, I always had a feeling that someday I was going to write a murder mystery set in Los Angeles. And because I was an artist, I decided I would write about it, write it set in the Contemporary Art Society of Los Angeles. Actually, Helen Harrison did a similar thing, but not for Los Angeles. She did it for New York. She has a murder mystery out that she wrote about her experiences in that community. So I've written about it in Los Angeles, and this is the book. 2 years ago, I sent the book to a publisher. He sent me back a contract, and he published the book. He just sent me a second contract about 2 or 3 weeks ago for the sequel. He's going to go ahead and publish the sequel, which I've already written. And that has a big cultural influence on me at this age and stage of my life. Because the first thing that happened to me was I was told I was too old to publish a book. Can you believe that? People said that to me. You won't have any success at your age publishing a book now. Nobody will want to publish it. I got nothing but negative responses from everybody. Especially book agents. Boy, they were real scary, those people. I bypassed them and sent the book directly to a publisher. And he was been a great guy. He said, "Oh, it's wonderful." He just immediately decided to publish it. So that's had a tremendous cultural impact on me at this stage in my life. I don't know how that might show up in my artwork. I'm not sure that it will, but it has convinced me to write more. Because all of you are much younger than me, and at my stage in life, when I stand up at my easel, which is down the other end of the studio here, and I paint, I can't do it as much as I used to. I physically cannot do it. I get exhausted within 2 hours. I used to be able to paint all day, right into the nighttime. I'd often not even sleep, just go to work the next day. Never bothered me, but I can't do that anymore. I stand there with my arm up painting, and after 2 hours, I'm physically exhausted. But I can sit here at this computer and write all day long, and it doesn't exhaust me at all. So I have this deep-seated feeling that the total volume of artwork that I'm going to produce for the rest of my life is probably going to decrease. The writing is going to increase. That's a major cultural shift in my entire outlook on life. If you want to see my most current artwork, you can look it up on Instagram or on my website. It looks, in my opinion, I can see Fritz Weiss's influence in that work. I can see Paul Clay's influence in it, and a little bit of Kandinsky as well. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lee. All right. And we have Susan DeTroy up next.
Thanks for the segue, Lee, because I'm going to talk about aging. And so I interpreted the idea to think about the culture that we live with and how that culture impedes our understanding of who we are as human beings as we age. And I want to, I don't know if I share, okay, share. I'm going to share with you a keynote that I have started for another presentation. It's not finished yet, but okay. Are you seeing my, are you seeing the cultural influences?
Yep.
Okay. So this, as I said, is a keynote I started, and the first is a video that I'm going to show that I made in 2018. So it's couched in the time of when I first started, like a year or two into the series of Portrait of Woman. And this is work that I was making before the pandemic. I was exhibiting and lecturing and teaching, and the pandemic shut all of that down. And so this video is about 4 minutes. Is the sound happening? No.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I've learned a lot about video making and imagery since then. And here I'm going to show a few other pieces from 2020 and 2021 in the series. These are newer. These pieces here are from the end of 2021 and into 2022. And these are some of the newest pieces that are in process. The one on the left is pretty much one done. The one on the right is in process. And I'm working on some pieces that are like the one on the right, which has movement and sound at the same time. It's sort of similar to my rose pieces, where it's a video and there's a sound. It's sort of meditative. And let's see, the last, I also haven't been experimenting with AI using the self-portrait and the roses together. And I think that might be it. How do I get out of this? Okay. That's it. So anyway, thank you. It was weird because I couldn't hear the sound on the video, but since you said you could hear it, that's great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Really interesting and diverse body of work there. You know, interesting to see the evolution as well.
Thank you.
So we have Michael Price.
Thanks, Colin. So the whole concept of culture and cultural identity is, well, it's a tough one for me at times. I think for most of my whole life, I've felt like I'm a stranger in a strange land. Growing up in the early 60s, I had raised by two very strong females from the south of France, from the Mediterranean area. My mom and dad have, divorced when I was about 2 years old. So back then, it was a different culture than it is today. And my grandmother especially had this innate nature in her that was magical. She loved nature. She influenced both my younger brother and I think in a lot of ways, nurtured our creativity. But the America of the 60s and such was stifling. I wasn't supported in school with my creative mind. And so I found myself oftentimes kind of shutting off. And for, I would say, most of my life, I've been pretty much a self-contained person who I've often said that I could be a loner very easily. So in my late 30s or so, I made some trips up to Canada and got a chance to really get immersed in the Indigenous culture that my natural dad had as part of his heritage. And for me, that was sort of revelatory in a lot of ways. And so in the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, I've now been living out in Phoenix, and I really felt like the desert was calling to me. So when my wife had a chance to move out here, we took it. And the desert is a magical place. And so I want to just share just a few images that I've been working on. Let me get this full screen. All right. So these are some images that I've been working on using AI recently, and a lot of them are sort of very surreal, abstract kind of qualities to them, but they kind of reflect this whole thing about what is culture and what motivates us, what drives us in terms of an attractive element and also a repulsive element. Because I think those things strongly influences as people and as artists, and how we see the world and how we reflect the world back to others. And I love the simplicity of the desert. It's beautiful and it's rich, and everything that lives out here lives on a knife's edge. There's no middle ground here. You either survive or you die. There's very little gray. And having grown up in the Midwest, where there's a lot of plenty in terms of vegetation and life, this is a very different place, but I love the simplicity of it all. And here you see structure. Here you see the landscape. And for me, this speaks to the heritage that I have from my father's side of the equation, and it speaks to me about what's important from what I got from my mom and my grandmother in that part of the Mediterranean. And so I just wanted to share just a few images of what I've been working on lately, just to kind of show off some of what I've been sharing here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for sharing, and interesting to hear, some of your early history, backstory. I never knew that about you and your background. So it's always interesting to learn more about, some of the artists in the group. So yeah, I actually thought maybe I would share something on the topic as well. So as some of you might know, I come from sort of a mixed ethnic background. My dad was Jewish, born in the Bronx in New York City, and my mom is of Japanese ancestry, born in Honolulu. And her parents, are both Japanese blood on both sides, and came into Hawaii from Japan. And so one of my big influences was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Camille, who was an accomplished calligrapher, and she taught and studied Japanese Shoto calligraphy both in Honolulu and in Japan. So this image here is from 2006 when I went to visit her, shortly before she passed away, actually. And brought my laptop and my Wacom tablet. So I was showing her, that you could write Shoto characters on a tablet, and she was amazed and got really excited about it. And that's my mom and her on the right, and my grandmother was writing some different things. She wrote her name, and there were other periods of time where I had visited her. I remember one visit specifically where I told her that I was going to go get a calligraphy set where, you have the ink and you can grind the pigment down and make ink and do the brush. And I thought she'd be very proud of me. And she actually kind of got angry at me and said, who do you think you are? You can't learn without a sensei, you're going to teach yourself. And I was, taken aback, but it made me also realize that, the amount of knowledge involved and, with Shodo, characters, each word is its own character with the Japanese kanji, and there's also katakana, which is more of a phonetic representation. So there's all types of different languages, different types of pictorial representation, but the kanji, requires learning an entire visual vocabulary, which is something that I was just not prepared or able to do. So I did in graduate school, though, get introduced to doing some work with Sumi ink, and one of my colleagues, who is an Italian artist, he asked me if I ever did any work with Sumi ink, and I said no. So he actually gave me a container of the ink, and I started. This was, I think, the first one where I would make these marks, with a brush on paper, and then create sort of a corresponding digital drawing that I then printed on top of the painted surface. So I photographed the painted, the hand painted piece, brought it into the computer and as a layer in Illustrator, and then they did these sort of gestural marks that were digital and rotated them in space that were like kind of correlating with the the brushwork. And so it was a little bit of an interplay between those two elements. And I thought it was interesting how my mom told me a story about how my grandmother would sit at the table and make the same character over and over for hours, and crumple it up, make it again, crumple it up, make it again, until she got it the way she wanted. And it sort of reminded me of the idea of sort of abstract painting, that a lot of times the things that I liked the best were done really quickly, but they required a lot of iterations and a lot of pieces that were thrown out in the garbage can to get the mark that I liked. So yeah, I think that trying to embrace that part of my cultural heritage definitely influenced me in my way of thinking. And none of these pieces really relate to any actual Japanese characters, but they're definitely inspired in part by that tradition. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share. That's what I thought of when this topic came up, and yeah, so that's what I got. So yeah, I want to thank all the artists who presented, and we have some time, just about half an hour, until we stop. So if anyone has any questions for any of the artists who presented, the floor is open, or just to open it up to the topic of discussion. I'm not sure, actually, you know what? Is David still in here? David Bloom? Are you in here, David?
I am here.
Okay,
Hi,
cool.
everybody.
Did you have you had an announcement you wanted to share with the group, right?
It's not really an announcement. You and I talked. It's more of a question. I live in Birmingham, Michigan. It's only 20,000 people. It's a suburb of Detroit, but I guess for people that aren't familiar, it's kind of like the Beverly Hills of Metro Detroit, Beverly Hills, like California. So it's a destination area for a lot of people in Metro Detroit to come to eat, to for some entertainment, some cultural events, which are kind of limited. But a lot of people come here from all over the Metro Detroit area. And we have a public library that I've been very involved in for various reasons since 2014. As a result of my involvement in 2014, they were going to, there was a $20 million bond to tear down 2/3 of the library and rebuild it. And I was one of the key people that were to defeat that, saying that we need a better plan to renovate the library and spend our tax dollars better. So since then, and we defeated the library bond like 76% to 25% or something like that. I've been working on 3 phases of renovation that are probably going to cost $7 or $8 million in total. 2 of those phases have been done. One was an addition, and then they're working on the final phase, the 3rd phase, which is also an addition. It'll create basically a public cafe and meeting space at the entrance of the library that will overlook the main park in our city. It's more like a public square, and then City Hall is on the other side of that. So it's a very prominent location. And there, I've started my 2nd public art project there that I've been sponsoring and organizing. So there is an art component there's a public art component to this new addition, and I can show you some photos. And what I was thinking, and there was a design that may get canned and go to something else, but there was this blank wall that was basically a few feet away from facing one of the glass entrances to, and the whole addition is basically all glass. There was this very large wall. And I was thinking, gee, we could put something there that was digital art and try and do something that wasn't just traditional art. And I was thinking about this group, and I thought, gee, what an interesting way to maybe promote this. And the library is always looking to find ways to fund things. So I was thinking that maybe we could, and I can show you that space, if people wanted to do donations or something like that, that we could offer to go to the library and say, we'd like to put a Techspressionism wall or something in the library with a large screen. So art of all digital artists could be displayed there. And then the name Techspressionism would also get out there. Alternatively, and the library director liked the idea of having a digital art wall. So there's a potential for doing something there, or even if we don't do a Techspressionism wall, if they end up with some type of digital art component, that we could have an exhibit there in the future. There's also another area that I'll show you where they're looking at having, and it's a much larger space of public art, and maybe there's some way of trying to link that with the digital component. So let me, if it's okay, I will share, because you probably don't understand what I'm talking about. I can share my screen here. Let's see how this works. Are you guys able to see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of the drawings that's being considered, and this here is one of the glass walls. There's another wall that comes all the way over here. They're looking at where they want to locate a cafe. This probably won't be here, but these are current windows, and they're looking at in their large windows, putting in some type of art there, or art that can change. And so that's one of the spaces. These are some additional photos of the area. This is the wall here that would be exposed to the park, where we could have something potentially. They've been trying to work on it. They've been trying to cram a cafe and a restroom in this, and they've been really struggling with that. These are some cafe design options, and it's the other side of here, the other side of this wall facing that window, which is right here, where conceivably where I pitched the idea to the library director of, I mean, to have a wall like that, just facing the street. I thought we could do something to improve the design by putting a large screen there and having art on there. And we'd probably even want to have speakers or something there. And we could have this lit, so people walking by at night, I mean, this area would be visible 24 hours a day, so if it was lit at night. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on trying to bring digital art to this space, and if there's anything that we could do as Techspressionists to to offer. People would be, if people would be interested in trying to figure something out, so we could go to the library and say, yeah, there's some people interested in chipping in and creating like a Techspressionism wall somewhere in this space. So that's the idea I'm trying to pitch to the group.
So would you be curating the project?
So if it's, if this is something, so if
Pardon
this
me,
is something that's permanent, if this is some, I mean, I would help organize doing something and getting a digital wall or a component in here. I don't necessarily think I'm qualified to be the curator. It would certainly be an honor, but if it's a permanent feature, this would be here, forever, as long as they decide to keep a screen on, and we would have to continue to have art go in there. This is a public building. It's managed by a library board and they're elected officials, and I certainly wouldn't want to have 100% control ad infinitum on what goes on this wall or how it's used. I don't think that would be fair to the library. But having a space that we could kickstart with digital art from our own group, and they could have art calls or other things, whether it's local artists or Michigan artists or national or other projects, I think it would be up to them to manage and pick who they wanted to curate that particular project.
What are the dimensions roughly, David, on the walls that are being under consideration?
So, well, this is the wall where I pitched it, and then they're thinking about taking out this design, but I would assume this is 7 or 8 feet high by maybe 3 or 4 feet wide. I mean, maybe it'd probably be more than that, because this is a handicap and there's a space and there's a baby changing station in there. So this is probably, I'm guessing, 6 to 8 feet.
I mean, I'll share my initial reaction with the group when David first brought this up to me, is I do like the idea of, being able to source work from the group. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the idea of it being sort of crowdfunded with the name Techspressionism attached to it, for a variety of reasons. One, it's going to be something where work is going to cycle through it, which might be different work that isn't necessarily even relevant to Techspressionism. But kind of the thing for me is, it's almost like hard to put into words, but what I think about what Techspressionism is, at least just for me personally, is sort of, the antithesis of an organization per se, like not necessarily something that would have their name on a plaque anywhere. It's something about that idea doesn't completely gel with me, but I told David that to put it out there to the group to see what people think. I think that certainly there are a lot of great artists, here in this community that could contribute work to open calls and help, create a variety of ongoing exhibitions, even themed exhibitions where different people come in and curate shows around a concept or whatever else. But and I'm not saying like I'm opposed to it either. But that was sort of my initial gut reaction, and definitely open to hearing what others have to say as well.
I mean, I think it'd be a cool idea if Techspressionism was involved, like say kicking it off, and then going with your idea, Colin, that basically this space is open to digital art, if that's kind of where the space is coming from, David, and that potentially there may be other things that some of the artists within the Techspressionist group might be involved with. Other, if this is a public space, you could do digital gallery shows, if you will, or digital presentations of artwork, like you said, themed or whatever. But Yeah, I think if it's the Techspressionist wall, then it becomes something more concrete than maybe what we are, at, you know, not being a full organization like you've said, but sort of a loose cadre of people who associate with one another. I don't know what's appropriate or not, but I think it'd be cool if this does really happen and there's a first showing of artwork there that this group could be involved with. I think that would be kind of cool.
I was thinking more of like a plaque or something that would say donated or by Techspressionism community artists. So it wasn't just because I understand Colin's point about Techspressionism funding it, but because I think at the last Salon we talked about us being more of a community that's more free flowing, and that would still get the name out there, but it wouldn't like totally directly tie in that Techspressionism is responsible for the wall.
I mean, you could say members of the Techspressionism community. You could fudge it somehow that way. I had a couple of other questions actually. I mean, you know this space or the proposed space a lot better. I'm sort of wondering what you're thinking about in terms of if we're going to be funding this somehow. Are you thinking of a simple screen here? Is it something that's actually integrated into the wall? You were talking about floor to ceiling. I don't know whether that's what you were talking about. I also, I mean, like I say, you can see the space better, but there's a green window in front, and it appears that there's a column that runs in front of this, the larger wall there. So how are you going to integrate the screen into the space, and what is happening on the other side of the space? Are people walking past it? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense for what it is.
So this is another, these are other photos of how the space would be used. There's the entrance there. So this entrance here it's called a nano wall. So the wall basically opens and then it folds. It's almost like sliding. It's a very expensive, it's a relatively new technology. And the whole wall slides in sections and moves over. When the wall is, when this whole window is open, I don't know how much of this space would be visible or not. That I'm not clear. I think this is, I think so. Some of this would be obscured when the wall is open during the day in the summer when things are nice. When it's closed, you'd be able to see everything. Now it would be through glass and it would be partially tinted. So it's not it's not pure clear 100% clear glass that's not tinted. There's a light tinting component. But this will be lit and you'd be able to see it. So it's kind of something that you would see, and it'd be probably more prominent at night when it's lit up. I'm thinking of if this is the design, that the screen would be the size of this whole wall. So the wall would be a screen and it would be incorporated. And I almost think we need some kind of audio component to go with it. So just like we saw this evening and we've seen previously, some of these slides, some of these shows include an audio or music component to it, which I think would be really cool and just enhance the whole idea of a digital technological artifact.
I have
and whether it's this space. Go ahead.
I have some comments and questions. My idea would be that the library would, or some officials and a curator would put out a call for entry call for art through like cafe, for example. And maybe it could be the theme of Techspressionism or I don't know, whatever the library thought was suitable. And then you would specify, the library would specify what size items they could entertain in the space. Would they be digital animations, digital printed images? Do some of these spaces face sunlight so that if there were physical images there, how it would affect the images? So I think knowing the dimensions of the space that allows for the showing of the art, knowing that would be important. And I think someone at the library establishing a call for art could maybe get this off the ground. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I mean, I would suggest maybe that you know, if you'd like, David, to put your contact info in the chat, or people could I guess locate you through the artist index on the Techspressionism site as well, and just sort of you know, kind of take it on the basis of interested artists, you know, artists who are
Yeah,
interested in
I'll
participating.
I'll do that.
You know.
So in the last, so Cynthia commented about light and what and how it would affect it. So I don't know if you guys can see there right here. There's another space that was the phase 2 addition, and it's an extension. And there's like inside this glass, there's a wall, maybe a foot, 2 feet in, that wraps all the way around. So this is where the first public art project that we did was, and it was basically wrapping all the way around. It was a 185-foot mural that was 18 inches high that wrapped around. There were 40 panels of art, and there was a zipper on at the end of each panel, and they all connected, and the artists collaborated on their art. And the second project we're putting in there is it's going to go up in the beginning of December, and it's 2 school districts here where their students go to the library, and it's elementary through. It's done in cooperation with the 2 school districts, and so there'll be art from elementary, middle, and high school students. Some of it collaborative. That'll be 40 separate pieces of art, 2 feet high by almost 36 of the pieces will be 48 inches long, that will be going up in this space. And there are times where it's very sunny and there's glare and you can't see it. But there are other times of the day when you can. So it's just trying to take advantage of the space and create basically an outdoor art gallery for different types of shows.
Yeah, and you know, definitely, you know, I would say a good place to continue the conversation also would be on say the Facebook group, the Techspressionist Facebook group. You could create a post, and then people who are interested, you know, could like sort of convene that way. You know, I definitely wanted you to be able to present this idea to everyone, but I also just wanted to make sure that anybody who had any questions for any of the artists about this topic of the day, cultural influences, could also have an opportunity to ask them. So, but I appreciate you know, you thinking of Techspressionism, David, and again, you know, I think that probably the strongest asset of the group is the artists themselves, and it doesn't necessarily always need to be seen as a collective venture when things are organized. You know, like I like people to think that curators can draw upon the artist index and the community to organize projects that don't necessarily have to be, you know, associated with Techspressionism per se. You know, it certainly doesn't preclude that, but you know, I think that that's probably because you know, like I'm not able to personally commit to going in and curating something on an ongoing basis. You know what I mean? Like, so that's just kind of like where I'm at. But I did want to open the floor up to anybody that might have any questions for any of the artists that presented tonight. or if not, we could continue talking about
Okay,
the
well, thank you
presentation.
very much. And again, I was thinking about the group, and the work that I've seen in some of these salons has inspired me and got me thinking about doing this. And without being part of this group and exposed to this, I wouldn't have come up with the idea. So
Gotcha. I appreciate that, and I don't know, the sort of idea of it being funded in a way that names the group. There could be aspects to that could be difficult, like, people who donate might perceive that their work is going to be included on an ongoing basis, or so on and so forth. It's like a sticky sort of type situation that, again, like if you're interested in organizing and negotiating it, I'm not saying not to, but that's just my sort of 2 cents on it.
okay,
I
we'll
think-
thank you very much.
I think ultimately, if someone at the library or David with that someone comes up with a vision for the project and establishes what that is, then there may be artists that want to be involved in it. But I think you need to know the ramifications, the theme or the idea or the vision of what would happen and the specifics. And I think
So there's two different, so the idea that I was trying to pitch to the group is to create a digital audio space that can be used for projects, whatever that might be. And then we could probably do the first project and propose something to them, and then they would be on their own to figure out how to use that. It wasn't necessarily a project based, because the space doesn't exist yet. This is a virgin, it's a virgin building. So we would be able to have some input as to what happens in there, or suggestions that we could make, since it hasn't been built yet and it's still under the design phase.
Oh, I just like to say, it's actually, I was one of the curator. I still try to curate more shows, and Ann Spatler, she curates shows called NFT Now. She do like we do have a more like a Techspressionist show, but she also she make a lot of effort, like she call for submissions on those what was the name of that platform? Call for entries. You need to pay, I think, about $200 to get an application form, and we need to pay to apply, so that can screen make sure it's a good work. Like, I don't really my curation in the Williamsburg Hotel, I don't charge artists because the Williamsburg Hotel, they sponsor the space. And I personally, I don't like to charge artists, okay, but everything's different, and it's all depends. Like, it's because for me, it's all like a tedious job as a curator. There's a lot of work that you cannot imagine. It's not even about money. It's about communications. It's about the time you can promote the artist. And another word, that's a lot of responsibility too. If it's like a physical artwork, because I used to do that too. There'll be more responsibility with the handling, shipping, a lot of things. You display the artwork. Yeah, so it's not something easy to do. But I'm glad that you have some suggestion, because I think the most difficult part right now for all the artists is to find the good physical locations. Like, I got several offers. Like, I just interviewed the co-founder of Special.io, Jin Ha. I think Special is actually one of the most, I would say, the really great the virtual space for most of artists, because they have all the architecture, design all this space, and also they have like all different type. And now they just launch more space that artists can put up their work, which I think that's that's really good because, but mostly we still like to let people see our work that's more like a physical thing that people can feel. But I'm just saying that if you design to do this, there'll be a lot of a responsibility. That's what I want to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
I totally recognize that. And hurting artists is like probably harder than hurting cats. So, no, I recognize that. The thing about the digital component is if it's digital and audio, you're not necessarily shipping physical things, which makes it kind of interesting and makes it easier to get and less costly to produce once the initial investment's made.
Yeah, we have a friend, Nina Colosi, who does the screens, and she puts in people's downtime. I'm sorry, on all advertising screens and screens in banks and all of this. They put 30-minute, 30-second or minute-long spots or longer pieces in digital spots like that. And so, I mean, it's a good model for doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely. There's also, I mean, there's dedicated platforms for things like this, like Black Dove is one of them that I recently kind of have gotten involved with. And I would suggest, anyone who's interested, check them out. I think they have an application process. There's a couple artists in the group that are on there now. Basically it's the sort of a model where collectors can have a subscription to Black Dove and then rent works, that might be cycled through on a screen, either a vertical or horizontal display. I mean, one thing to consider is that, there are sort of standard aspect ratios, the most common being 4K, which would be 16:9, either vertical or horizontal. That's what they're asking their work to be formatted as, and I would say that's generally a standard when you're looking architecturally at the space in terms of what kind of hardware is going to be available to put on the wall, and that would sort of also determine the specs for a call for entry, so there's a lot of considerations, but there are also plenty of solutions out there. I think the idea of putting together and curating a show of Techspressionist artists is probably a little more feasible just logistically than necessarily crowdfunding something around the idea of Techspressionism, simply because it isn't an organization per se. So if the people included in the funding process are going to eventually not be in the presentation that's on the wall, then that could be, problematic, I would think.
Again, if you're, in the two projects that I did, the public art projects that I've been partially funding, my art is not going in there because I don't want there to be that conflict. And I didn't even want to be a curator. I wanted there to be independence with the art that's going in and what's going on. So no one's saying, oh, well, you did this and you spent this money, so it's your art going up there. I wanted to make sure that there was a real, genuine, and verifiable public benefit to the project that wasn't something that was coming back to me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of a conundrum, but I see Techspressionism as something that's sort of an open source idea. So if, an independent curator wants to go and put together a show of Techspressionist artworks, I would applaud that and encourage it. But on the flip side, to say that Techspressionism funds anything doesn't really sit well with me personally in terms of the conceptual framework around the idea, if that makes sense. It's like saying pop art presents this exhibition. or it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it's a newer area, and so what we'd be doing is establishing a platform where Techspressionism community artists or other artists would be able to show their work, and it's kind of like we're just lighting the fire and putting a little gasoline on it, and it's up to other people to keep tossing on wood to keep it going.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you for letting me pitch the idea.
Absolutely. And, thank you for thinking of the group. And, again, I would encourage individual artists to connect in terms of developing this out, for those that are interested. So yeah, I mean, is anyone have any conversation, questions? I mean, we're basically at time at this point for any of the artists that have presented tonight.
Well,
Cynthia.
yeah, sorry, sorry, I kept pressing the wrong unmute. So sorry about the dings from people texting me. I loved the talks tonight. I think I didn't present personally because I feel that I've presented enough, and I think people have an idea that I use cultural reference a lot in my work, and I can always come up with new images, but whatever. But I just wanted to observe that I saw a couple trends tonight, and I would like us maybe in the future to return to these. Like, I felt like each one of these. So I saw people talking about personal histories, and under that I include family histories as what led them to their work. And I feel like that could be its own topic one time, even with the same people. Everyone was so excellent. I mean, this was really wonderful tonight. And how that fed into narratives. And the narratives were not always personal narratives, but kind of like I'm thinking about Tommy and thinking about the subway. So a personal experience, but not in the same, different veins of things. Yeah, okay, you're there. And then I personally am always interested in people's source material. And one of the things I thought it was interesting, I think people know that I've worked a lot from Hebrew manuscripts, and before that Persian and Indian manuscripts, and it was kind of a conscious decision to move away from Western wall painting as influence. And I was impressed, Colin made the decision to look at calligraphy, but that of course, but again, ties into personal narrative. So I just want to observe, maybe we can talk about combining all these influences and also looking at non-Western wall painting a little more, how that can happen. Because I think it's really, personally, I think that's a way of being political, of opening up our culture, looking at other things. So that's it. And I just would like to see some of these topics spun off into the future, but maybe in a few months, people can think about it and come back. And because by then we'll all have new work.
Oh, well, it's very funny because I was born in Taiwan, but Taiwan is more like because of the World War II, so it's like some Chinese they relocate, they move to Taiwan. But I always feel so touched with Japanese and Italian, European, those type of art, and I don't have any particular interest about Chinese art. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I really don't know why. It's just since I was a little, like even when I like to draw something, it's all like a Western. It's well, I think it's funny, but because of the and the other thing is in the contemporary world right now, what happened? It's all like a Western. You can see there's a like like United States, even like a pop art, or everything is like a Western. Like we want to recall, so what is the Chinese art? What is the Oriental or Asian art? Like everything is like a mixture, like a fusion.
Everything's a mixture now, but if you
Yeah.
go back 500 years ago, it wasn't a mixture. And I think that there's some assumptions. You know, some of us who are older were taught certain things in art school. And when I was a kid, and I went to a museum regularly because, you know, like my family, and I took art classes at the museum, but I thought that I was not allowed to go to the second floor of the museum because I thought it was a church. I thought the second floor of the museum was the Catholic Church and not really open to me. So that's something I've kind of lived with, you know, because what we were taught was art was so heavily Catholic Church. So anyway, that's kind of my personal journey. Obviously I was influenced by traditional Renaissance and medieval art, but I didn't feel that I related to it in any way. So it all mushed together. Anyway, these are topics. I'm going to shut up because I've been talking.
I have a question
I
for Michael.
like where you're coming from, Cynthia. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for Colin and Michael. Colin, when you embrace the calligraphic elements in your artwork, even though, you know, initially your grandmother, you know, didn't understand your desire to engage as a self-initiative, you did eventually get there. Providence intervened and you got some free ink and, you know, you were able to start working on your own. But did you gain any particular insight or release or closeness in sentiment to your Oriental roots in the process of embracing it or using it and feeling satisfied with the artwork? And I would pose the same question to Michael for his series of Desert.
I didn't get. Could you try again?
That's Siri. That's Siri.
Oh, okay.
I have a very aggressive Siri. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I would say that yeah, definitely. You know, I feel that in making that work, it was a way of me sort of investigating my own identity. You know, I mean, I grew up far from that side of the family. Most of them are in Hawaii, which is now where my mom is living with my sister and where she was born. And that whole side of the family is over there on Oahu. So I never really, you know, identified, you know, as Asian per se, you know, until people called me that. And I was like, what does that mean? You know, as a young person. So like, I think it gave me sort of the I don't know if it would be licensed, but the feeling that it was okay to, you know, to look at that type of creative output and it in a personal way. You know, it gave me a personal connection in terms of having sort of more respect for my grandmother, her culture, you know, like you know, a sense of self, but also it's interesting how it also, you know, made me think about the interrelationship of that type of mark making with something like abstract expressionism and how the expressive quality of the brushstroke you know, is used across cultures in different ways, you know. So, and that was already sort of like, you know, an area within art history and painting that I had been interested in. So it definitely, you know, it made some connections happen in my mind, you know, in terms of investigating that and also, you know, started me thinking about language and visual language, the idea of a pictogram, you know, representing a concept versus phonetic alphabets, and even started thinking about, katakana, which is the phonetic Japanese alphabet, and Hebrew, as an early phonetic alphabet, and how they might have been developing different places in the world simultaneously, but conceptually this idea of a phonetic alphabet was a very novel thing, comparatively to what had existed before in terms of how human beings communicate. So yeah, it definitely, made me think about a lot of different things, but anyway, I'm gonna pass it over to Michael because I think we have to probably wrap up the recording
All
pretty
right.
soon.
I'll try to be as brief as possible here. Yeah, Verneda, it's interesting because the little anecdote that Colin shared about what his grandma said to him, about trying to cut corners to do something immediately. In I think a lot of indigenous cultures, and I know for my Ojibwe connection, because it's oral tradition, there's a really different way of teaching and learning. It's very intimate. It's teacher to student directly, where Western culture, we've gotten used to the power of written language, and you can learn at a distance that way. With oral traditions, the history comes through from your teacher to you, and then if you teach, then you carry that on, but you do it from a new vantage point because you're a different human being than your teacher was and that teacher. And so there's a continuity, but it's a living thing. It's not the dead, it's not the dead script from, I don't want to be negative about Western culture, but a lot of times old texts are revered and you lose connection to what the history was. And so for me, seeing the Ojibwe artwork, it's very much, it's similar to a lot of the African culture and the Aboriginal cultural views, especially with animals and especially with describing the world. It's very relational. There's a connection between human and the world. And that's what I was trying to show in my sort of desert landscapes. We as Western culture see the world as dead, as objects. And in Aboriginal, in ancestral mindsets, we're connected intimately. There's no separation, and the world is alive. In the Ojibwe tradition, you talk about animals in a relational sense, plants in a relational sense. And so that's why, going back in the old days, when you collected plants and if you killed animals, there's a reverence because you're not just taking something, you're thinking about what is that I'm grabbing or killing and how it relates to me and what needs to be there in order for that to continue to thrive. And we've lost that in Western society. Everything is just an asset. And so where humans are up here and everything else is at this other level. And it's like if we step on a bug, most of us, number one, don't even realize we've done it. And if we do, it's like, oh, it's only a bug. And I think, I think back to, I think it was, oh gosh, one of the movies where the Dalai Lama wouldn't want to dig up a space and make sure that they didn't kill the worms in that space because they were building something new. And so they had to sift, the priests had to sift through and pull out any of the live creatures before anything could move forward on what they were doing. Anyway, I'm rambling on here, but anyway, that for me is kind of where that has really been a strong part of my spirituality, my connection to physics, and how the world is alive at all levels, from subatomic to galactic. And I think for me, that creates the magic in the universe. I don't need a God. I don't need anything else, because it's so damn beautiful. I mean, it's just, that's where I'm coming from on all of this. So anyway, thanks for asking. I hope that helps.
Can I add something more about Renaissance? Why I particularly like Renaissance, because as I mentioned, before the Renaissance, that people, they don't even see the other side of the world. And the art is not something we see right now. Like Da Vinci, like the smile of Mona Lisa, the people, when they do the portrait, all the elite, the noble, the rich people, they don't smile, they all look serious. This is like a really big change. And this change is just like right now, like we are in the pandemic, like during the Renaissance, they have a Black Death. There's a lot of people die. And right now, like we are jumped from the Web 2 to Web 3. So in the blockchain, like in like AI or blockchain, we all the same, like in the metaverse, you don't look like you, I don't need to look like me. So that's the whole thing about, all the cultural change. Like this is exactly, like why a lot of young people like Korean pop, they not even understand what the lyric, this is all Korean, but they like to dance, they can understand the music. So that's the whole thing about, I feel like, all these culture, we are like influence each other. So even like a personal experience, that's something we can influence each other. So that's why we're here, like Techspressionist, like I always feel like Verneda, like we not belong to any type of group until I see Techspressionist and say, oh, bingo, this is something I like to contribute something. And it's not genre. It's not. It's a genre, but it's an art genre. It's a movement. It's not like something. Even we can think about monetize. How can you monetize it? Like abstract expressionism? It's a genre, right? So yeah. So this is why I picked Renaissance. Not necessarily, I'm not Italian, but it's just like I feel like, especially in the world with the internet, is the cultural influence is every day. That even you watch TV, when you do whatever, it just okay. So that's my interpretations.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to put a cap on it at this point. We're definitely over time here, but I really appreciate everyone's shares, and people are more than welcome to stick around after we stop our recording, and hopefully we'll come to a consensus on the topic for 2 weeks from now, which I think there was already a couple good suggestions. But I am going to, without further ado, end our recording in 3, 2, 1, and cut.